Welcome, Stuart here, unrepentant atheist, and I apologize for the picture quality. I'm using my cam that's built into my laptop, so I hope you can tolerate that. The main thing is you can hear me. So today, what I'm going to be doing is reviewing the line, the calls that came into John Gleeson and Forrest Valkai last night on Sunday. No show with Matt Dillahunty, so I watched the show with Gleason and Forrest Valkai. I thought it had some fairly good calls in it, so I thought, yeah, why not? I'll make some notes and I'll review some of those calls. So I'll be doing that. Also, what else am I going to talk about? Oh, yes, I've been watching TED Talks on the subject of conspiracy theories, conspiracy theorists, and how to deal with them. And I saw some different perspectives, which I thought was quite interesting. So I'm going to be saying a few things about that. And as my best friend is a conspiracy theorist, I was all ears for advice on how to handle a full on flat earther, moon hoaxer, truther, vaccine skeptic conspiracy theorist, how to deal with somebody who holds these views and what's more, talks about them a lot. So, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Different approaches. I'm not really convinced that any of them are suitable, but what the heck? I'll talk about them shortly. So you're welcome to, if you're tuning in, you're welcome to leave any comments in chat. And if you're watching this as a recording, you can do chat replay and see what comments and chats were coming in while I was doing this um, live stream. What else? What else am I going to be talking about? Oh yeah, I had a trip to church. I've got something to say about that. So, in fact, I'll say something about that in a moment. And I've also been reading this book, History of God, and I'm going to be talking about. Okay, I'm only on I'm only on the first chapter, so I'm plodding through it a bit. But I'd rather plod through it and read it very carefully, which is what I do. I don't books like this have got so much detail in them. There's no point reading them quickly and then forgetting what you've read. So quite often I will chew over chapter at a time, even a paragraph at a time, and even go back and read a paragraph again, because this book has got a lot of detail in it, and assuming that it's historically accurate and well researched, it's got a lot in it about how theism developed and how really, in a way, not a lot's changed about why people hold these beliefs. Nothing really too much has changed. So, yeah, I'll say something about that. But I suppose, really, as I've advertised this, my live stream as a review of the calls from the line, I'll go through those quickly so that I can talk about more interesting things. Okay, so first of all, Howard's call. Howard called in. Now, I don't know whether Howard has got his own YouTube channel or something, because I think Forrest said, look, you've got what you wanted. You know, you can clip out what you want and use it. And you've got an audience. You've got to show yourself. And I don't know who Howard is, but I presume that he has his own YouTube channel. And obviously, it's probably a Christian and has phoned up, and give him credit. I give credit to anybody who phones any of these call-in shows to express their views and to talk with the hosts about their beliefs. I give credit to absolutely anybody who calls in genuinely wanting to talk about these things. And I say that, of course, because there are prank callers, and I know I don't admire those people. And a prank caller did call in. Well, somebody with a bit of a strange name, Salami. I didn't even know that was a name. I mean, I know that it's a very tasty kind of sausage, but made out of cured pork. But I didn't know that it was a name. But why not? It's a tasty name anyway. So he came on. I'll cover his call first as I'm talking about him. He or she or they, I can't remember, came on and said that poverty poverty is a choice. Actually, I'm sorry about that. It wasn't it wasn't Salami, it was somebody else. It was Riamu who called in and turned out to be some kind of a prank caller. But yeah, I'll just say a few words about so Salami phoned in to say, yeah, poverty is a choice. Um, well, I think that Forrest made some some very good points that um, it depends on the circumstances. It might be a choice if you've grown up with a fair amount of privilege and you've had opportunities and you decline those opportunities, and as a result you find yourself in poverty, then I suppose, yeah, I could agree that it's a choice. But it might not be a choice if, I don't know, you've not had the educational opportunities, and maybe you've grown up in severe poverty and you're in a trap where you can't get out of it. I can imagine that those people who are growing up in villages in India, for example, Bangladesh, and some of the poorest, Burkina Faso, and some of those places in Africa are so incredibly poor that you couldn't really say that poverty is a choice. Now, in the liberal democracies, I use that term advisedly, of course, because of certain things which are going on in some countries. I would say that it still might not be a choice, because you could say that, for example, in Great Britain, it's true that if you work hard at school, you could do well, and then you could get into university. If you work really hard, you could get a law degree, and then you could eventually work for a firm of lawyers and do well. And yeah, or if you work even harder, you could become a doctor, and you could come all the way from a fairly poor background, and through sheer hard work and determination, you could achieve that. Um, it happens. It happens a lot, and you might not even achieve as much as that, and still come from a impoverished background and still do relatively well. You might decide to be a plumber or a bricklayer or whatever. But the point is, I suppose to an extent, we live in a meritocracy, and the more your merit is, then the greater your reward. The harder you work, then the greater your um, material reward, at least, will be. And that's fairly true. It's a fairly good rule of thumb. And on the other hand, if you are lazy and you don't like working, then you could find yourself in a impoverished situation. So yeah, in that case, in these sort of cases, poverty is a choice. Um, but well, of course, if you're lazy by nature, then I suppose you haven't really got much choice, have you? It's like a kind of deterministic thing. If you're lazy by nature, then you could say it's not a choice at all. It's just my nature. That's how I am. I'm just lazy. There are so many sort of arguments that you could make about whether it's a choice or not. But I think that ultimately it it would be it would it's okay. Ultimately, one can't generalize on this, and it's only on a case by case basis. So I think the point that Salami was making is that at the end of the day, if you find yourself in extreme poverty, you could go into prostitution and make money that way, which I think is an absolutely ludicrous point. Um, yeah, I think that to suggest that unless you go in, if you find yourself impoverished and if you're not prepared to do prostitution, then it's your choice to be poor. I can't really agree with that statement at all, because uh, you might not want to sell your body. It might be something which is against your principles or something that you just find that you wouldn't be able to do. So it wouldn't be a choice, would it, in that case? Okay, so moving on, let's look at that call that did turn into a quite surprisingly a bit of a prank call. So Riamu called in, I think a Muslim, and sounded like quite a reasonable sort of person at first. So saying if there's no God, where is hope coming from? What's the point in living if there's no eternal life, etc., etc. These are sort of points that we hear time and time again. And I suppose that when religious people talk about hope, why do you believe in God? Well, it gives you hope. And yeah, but hope for what? That's the question. Answering it, maybe what they mean is hope that there will be some sort of life after death, that death isn't the end. Maybe that's what they mean. I don't know. It's very difficult to say what they mean, or it's just a kind of generic buzzword. Hope, religion gives you hope, Jesus gives you hope, etc. So yeah, with Riamu, I mean, the call seemed to be going quite well, and then this bizarre kind of, I don't know, flute music or something started, and I found that really quite strange. And I think they determined from that, realized that Riamu was a prank caller, which did seem a bit sort of weird, really. Okay, so then Billy. Yeah, Billy. Billy's been calling in for years. He first called in about 15, 20 years ago. And he comes in with exactly the same kind of thing. I get the feeling that he goes a lot to Christian websites which try to rebut the theory of evolution. And he came on with various points that he had to make. And of course, I think Forrest is a biologist, so he's the right person to uh, to be there when somebody like this calls in. And Billy seems to be getting even worse than he was before in terms of the way that he presents himself. He's kind of stuttering and can't really express himself very well, and uh, he wasn't impressive at all. And then he made this point to Forrest: "Hey, dude, I don't want to piss you off, but I've got things to say, and I don't want to make you angry." And Forrest said, "Well, I'm not angry. I'm not pissed off. I'm annoyed because you're not listening to what I'm saying." Um, well, the problem is, of course, all Billy's points are aimed at proving his theology. That's the problem. That's the whole problem with theists and science. Any points, any scientific information they'll have, or any research that they've done as theists, will be to prove and defend theism. That's the problem. Whereas scientists honestly really just do want to go where the evidence leads. Now, we often hear theists saying exactly the same thing, that, oh, we're going where the evidence leads, but they're not. They're not going where the evidence leads at all. They're just paying lip service to that general principle, that you try to approach the question and the evidence with no bias, or as little bias as possible, and go wherever it takes you. You don't you don't lead the evidence where you want it to go, which is what obviously a lot of theists do. So let me see. Yeah, now this was funny. This was really funny. So I can't remember what they were arguing about, and I can't summarize Billy's points, but it got to the point where John's recommended that you go to a website, something like, I don't know, Talk Origins or something like that. And Billy said, "Hey, dude, I don't want to go there." And what is it, Christian website or something? I mean, yeah, sure. Why would uh, why would two atheists recommend a Christian website to somebody like Billy, explaining how the theory of evolution works? That was a really. It just shows how much he's losing it. Okay, so that was Billy. And then Steve called in and he challenged the host and atheists in general, saying, "What authority have you got to interpret the Bible?" And, you know, well, I mean, and John, I think John Gleason said, well, just that I'm an autonomous individual with eyes, I can read, and I just try and, from the text, the way the text presents itself, I try to do my best to interpret what is being said. And he said, well, and Steve said, well, the Catholic Church, they use expert uh, theologians, etc., and they have got all the authority to interpret in a way that you don't. So I think that, yeah, he asked this, I've written it down here. Name me one scholar that says Jesus said unbelievers should be killed. Okay, so I think Forrest said, well, Jesus is God, right? I said, okay, right. And in the old, and God is unchanging, right? Yep, right. And God in the Old Testament said that unbelievers should be slain, right? And God is Jesus, so yeah, Jesus also said that then. Yeah, so good point, actually. So just coming back to this thing about interpretation, if a Christian comes to me and says, what's your take on, I don't know, this or that in the Bible? I say, well, I think that Jesus probably meant this, or I think that, when John said in the beginning was the word, he used the word sort of poetically talking about Jesus. And um, and then they say, well, where's your authority to interpret that? Um, how can you possibly put your own interpretation on this holy text? And well, my answer to that is that there are thousands of interpretations out there, and you could exclude all those that are from lay people, just casual readers of the Bible, and say that only those who've got theology degrees are qualified. But even then, you're going to find differences in interpretation. And then how do you decide which one is true? So what authority do you need to interpret the Bible? I'm quite happy for any Christian to say to me, you don't understand the Bible. You can't interpret the Bible. You should go and listen to ministers. They can interpret the Bible, but you can't. All right, fair enough. I don't care. I don't mind. You know, I'm willing to admit that I've got no special expertise in interpreting the Bible, and all my interpretations might well be untrue. However, as an atheist and as a skeptic, the only thing that concerns me about the Bible are not sort of individual interpretations or special interpretations by holy people or the church or theologian experts. What I want to know are the claims. What are the claims in the Bible which are extraordinary? I'm not interested in uh, mundane claims, such that, I don't know, Jesus broke bread at the Last Supper. I mean, that's a mundane claim. Everybody breaks bread when they have supper, if there's bread at the table. I'm not interested in that. Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Now, in the Bible, it says that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. How do you interpret that? Is it literal, or is it a metaphor for a man who was spiritually dead, and Jesus, uh, by his charismatic nature and the way that he told parables, and maybe just the look of him, somehow breathed some kind of life into Lazarus? So, which interpretation is correct? I think you'll find Christians will say that the literal interpretation is correct, that Jesus really did raise Lazarus from the dead, and that my suggested possible interpretation is wrong because Christians don't care. Well, a lot of Christians don't care. Let's be careful and not generalize too much. A lot of Christians would rather have a magic trick than something which actually is probably closer to what really happened, that Jesus never performed any miracles whatsoever. But maybe he went around and he found people that were down in their spirits. Maybe they'd had some misfortune in life or whatever. And he had a way of talking to them that brought them to life. And maybe that's what it means. Maybe that's what the true meaning behind the Lazarus story is, that his spirit was raised to life. His demeanor and his mood was rejuvenated by an encounter with Jesus. Not that he was literally raised from the dead, but that's not good enough for Christians on the whole. Christians want it to be a miracle that Lazarus really died and that Jesus really brought him back to life. My point is, I'm only interested in extraordinary claims which are in religious texts. So I don't care about interpretations. You tell me what the claim is that you interpret from that text, i.e., Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. That's your interpretation. Okay? Now prove it. So that's all I'm interested in from the New Testament, from the Old Testament, the miracles, the extraordinary claims. Are they true or not? The whole business of interpretation, that is for the people who really believe in this stuff. It's not for people like me, because all I'm interested in are the claims and whether they're true or not. Okay, so I mean, me having a wrong interpretation, according to some Christian on the Bible, doesn't mean that I'm wrong in disbelieving the extraordinary claims, that any of the extraordinary claims in the Bible are true. If I've made wrong interpretations of the Bible, then um, I'm still justified in my skepticism that anything extraordinary in the Bible ever took place. That's the point. Because Christians will often say, "Oh, you've got the wrong. Oh, you're an atheist. You don't know how to interpret the Bible. That's why you're an atheist." No, I'm not an atheist because I don't know how to interpret the Bible. I'm an atheist because I don't believe the claim in the Bible that there is a God. That's why I'm an atheist. And that's what the Bible claims, right? Right. Oh, yeah. You won't get a Christian saying, "Oh, no, you got the interpretation wrong. It doesn't claim in the Bible that there's a God." Oh, so there's no God then? Oh, well, no, the Bible does claim that there's a God. And that's what I've got an issue with. Okay. Okay. Prozac has left a comment. If Jesus did all of these miracles, I don't understand why the earliest writings from Paul don't mention them. The resurrection, yes, but I don't think he. A lot of New Testament scholars, Bart Ehrman and others, have mentioned that, and I've read that as well. Yeah, I find it strange. Paul's writings, I think, are the earliest Christian writings, and yeah, it's really weird that you would have thought that once Paul had his Damascus Road experience, that he would try to gather as much information as possible from people who um, were alive when Jesus was around, to ask them questions. What did Jesus do? What do you remember? Did anything extraordinary happen? Yeah, it's really weird, isn't it? You'd think, and I mean, Paul was, I think, quite a wealthy man. He had the means to get around. He was very he was literate. He could write to people. and he could try and get in as much information as possible from. Um, I mean, when did he have his road to Damascus experience? Wasn't it 30 years after Jesus died, or less than that? It was like 20 years after Jesus died, wasn't it? So I presume there were still people alive who remembered Jesus that Paul could have gone to and said, right, Jesus of Nazareth. He would go. He must have gone to Jerusalem, Nazareth, the Holy Lands, and tried to find out from people about Jesus. And it's possible a couple of things. First of all, a lot of people had already died. He may have heard secondhand or third-hand stories. He may have spoken to some people who knew Jesus, but it may well be that they reported nothing extraordinary. They might have just said, yeah, he was an itinerant rabbi moving around with some followers. He had parables. He was trying to preach love thy neighbor, etc. And nobody probably mentioned any miracles which actually I find in a way kind of strange that nobody mentioned any miracles to Paul, claiming that Jesus had performed miracles, because in those days, miracles were sort of not that unusual. People sort of believed in these things. You could go on a journey and come back and tell stories about miracles, and people would, from what I know and from some of the research I've done, you might well be believed. There wouldn't be the same amount of skepticism. So yeah, I find it really weird that Paul doesn't really mention anything about that. I don't know. Maybe he thought the resurrection was enough. I mean, let's face it, the resurrection's the big one, isn't it? But yeah, he doesn't mention him healing and bringing people back from the dead or anything like that at all. Okay. Yeah, so that was Steve. Steve he was a bit sort of aggressive, and I think he got cut off eventually. Who else? Howard. Oh yeah, Howard called in. He said so he said, yeah, the Big Bang. He said explosions destroy, they don't create. And of course, then there was this correction of this belief that the Big Bang was an explosion. That's one of the problems. Somebody coined the term Big Bang. It wasn't an explosion, of course. It was an expansion. He said he doesn't believe in gravity, and he seemed to have a script, and it seemed that he was a flat earther, possibly. He denied that, and when asked what shape the Earth is, he said, oh, it's a dynamic, it's sort of changing. And then he sort of couldn't define what a theory is. Okay, and I think Howard was the one they were saying he was somebody who was calling in really just so that he could make clips and he could use the film on his own channel. Okay, then Jack called in. He was quite a nice guy. He was a theist. He said that he's been sober for 20 years, and they congratulated him on that. And he said he'd been to, I think, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Jesus had helped him. The power of Jesus inside him had helped him to cure himself of alcoholism. That he got into Christianity when he was passing by his mum's kitchen, and they were having a Bible reading or something in there. And he went in, he got into Christianity big time. He believes the Bible is 100% true. His friend also got into Christianity or started reading the Bible, and he became a preacher. And let's see. Oh, yeah. And then he said, Jesus, yeah, he admitted that the Old Testament is bad and repressive on women, etc., but that in the New Testament, Jesus came to improve women's position. And of course, Forrest challenged him on that and said, no, it's not the case. And after all the conversation, he said, well, I still believe, and I still believe I stopped drinking because I've got the power of Jesus inside me. And he ended up with Pascal's wager, saying, well, it it might not all be true, but if it is true, I've really hit the jackpot. So yeah, um, that's about it. Okay, well that's more or less all the calls, and I'll just say one or two other things. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I went to church. Went to this church that I've been going to I don't know, fairly regularly. There's always something that sort of amuses me in these Christian services, and the theme on this week's service seemed to be the fact that you've got a friend in Jesus. You have got a wonderful friend, the best friend that anybody could possibly want, Jesus Christ. If you believe in Jesus, he'll walk with you, he'll be with you, he'll provide you with comfort, he'll provide you with strength, and he'll always be at your side. And you need never worry about anything at all because he'll be there right next to you, looking after you. He's your best friend, nobody else. Jesus is the man. One of these days, I'm going to go to the minister there. I'm going to say to him, "Is Jesus your friend?" And he'll say, "Well, yes, indeed. Jesus is my friend." And I'll say, "Have you ever seen Jesus?" He'll say, "Well, not directly." Okay. "Have you ever heard Jesus talk to you?" Say, "Well, kind of in my prayers, but not specifically heard Jesus' voice." Okay. "Have you ever seen any trace of Jesus whatsoever?" Say, "Well, not really, but he's kind of still with me." I would say to him, "How can you have a friend that you've never heard, you've never seen, and you've got no evidence that this is really your friend at all, or that this sort of friend even exists in that sense? How can that be your friend when all your friends, you can shake their hands, you can give them a hug, um, you can spend time with them, you can help them and do them favors, they can do you favors and help you out when you're in trouble. I mean, in a real pragmatic sense. And yet, this Jesus, you're saying that that's your best friend, better friend than any of your real friends. You've never seen this Jesus. You've never heard this Jesus. You've never had a conversation with this Jesus. And it might well be that you're just making it all up. I think I need to have that conversation with with that minister who said to me that Jesus is my best friend. No, actually, my best friend's a conspiracy theorist. Actually, it would be a very fine thing indeed if my best friend, if there was a real Jesus, because it would be nice to have a best friend that doesn't promote and preach conspiracy theories. So yeah, but until I've got some evidence for Jesus being my friend or even existing, then I'm afraid that I'll be stuck with my best friend being a conspiracy theorist. So okay, so that let's see, have I got anything else to say about that particular? Um, Actually, yes, I have. I've got something else to say. Okay, there was an old gentleman that stepped up and talked about a pilgrimage that he'd made to, well, where is it? It's in Spain, Santiago something. I need to research this. Santiago de something. I can't remember, but it's in the sort of northwest of Spain, just above Portugal. And it seems that thousands and thousands of pilgrims go there because by tradition, one of the apostles had been there, preached, returned to the Holy Lands, and had his head cut off. And apparently, his body was returned to Santiago. And you can go there and you can pay pilgrimage to this apostle. And apparently, thousands do. So I don't know. What did I find? Why did I mention this? Just because, okay, well, first of all, I know that a lot of the stories about the apostles and what happened to them are based on church tradition, like 100 years later, written in the sort of second century Common Era. And they were making up a lot of stories about people, about apostles, mainly how they died, that there were these big martyrs that were, I don't know, the Romans got hold of them and said, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Do you believe that Jesus is the king and not Caesar? On pain of death. So, in other words, if you say yes to this, you're going to die in the most absolutely horrible way. Deny your Jesus and um, hail Rome, or hail the emperor as the king. And that these apostles said, no, Jesus Christ is my one and only king, my one and only Lord. And I deny that Caesar is my king. And they were prepared to say this on pain of death, very painful death, and they died martyrs. There's no evidence for that, that they were ever, that any of them were ever in this position. And that if they'd been away preaching, they may have been executed, they may have been put to death, but it's not like they would have had a choice. And it may well be that some of them really did recant. And to save your skin, if you've been following a master, you might say, yeah, no, he's a fraud, an absolute fraud. Um, there's no need to put me to death. I was just humoring him. The poor chap, he's mentally deranged. He thinks that he's the son of God. So, no, there's no need to put me to death. I don't believe that. And in fact, the reality is that some of the apostles may well have renounced Jesus. And I think in the New Testament, we can see in the Gospels, some of them did. One or two of them did renounce. They denied that they knew Jesus. Yeah, so it's not extraordinary to me at all. But if you're a church father wanting to promote the religion of Christianity, you're not going to write down cowardly tales about how the apostles really died or how they really got on and how they denied Jesus. You're not going to write that, are you? You're going to write inspirational tales. I mean, look, I don't know anything, but I mean, even I would do that. Even I would, if I was trying to promote a religion, I would make up stories. And those guys in the second century, they're probably cleverer than I am. So I'm sure that they would make up those stories as well if they're trying to get a religion going. But no, Christians won't see this. Oh, no, it really happened. They wrote it down because it's real. And the reason it's real is because lots of people died for their beliefs. They wouldn't have died for a lie, would they? That's why I'm a Christian. Okay. If you want to be a Christian on that basis, that's fine with me. Okay, yeah. So this old man was talking about his pilgrimage. Apparently, he had to walk 100 kilometers. You only get a certificate of the pilgrimage. Yeah, they actually hand out a certificate. I think they've turned the whole damn thing into a tourist attraction, and I think it's very financially lucrative to the local people, to the local economy, that they've got all these pilgrims visiting, buying icons and paying for the certificate of completion and everything else. And religion is just one big industry. And it really sticks in my throat that religions can pass themselves off as charities and not pay taxes. I think that's one of the worst things about the taxation system, where religion is really given too much money, effectively, and subsidies by not being taxed. Having said that, the Church of Scotland is in dire financial trouble, despite the fact that they don't have to pay any tax. They're in absolutely appalling financial trouble, and they're losing money hand over fist year on year, and it's getting worse. They're having to close churches down, and they're having to sell churches to commercial interests, pubs, restaurants, etc. So yeah, they're in trouble, but others are not in trouble. The Catholic Church, I think they've got more money than ever. They've still got a huge amount of money flowing into the coffers, and obviously a lot of the other churches have got loads of money. The Mormon Church is the richest religious organization in the world, even richer than the Vatican. Would you believe that? I think that they're worth something like $10 billion or something, some fairly large sum. Although I suppose in the modern world, $10 billion isn't really a lot of money if you consider that one man like Elon Musk is worth $100 billion or something like that. I don't know. Okay, so yeah. Okay, then. So let me just talk briefly about this book, History of God. Yeah, so it goes back to the ancient, the Sumerians, and the part of the world that's now called Iraq. So the Sumerians seems to me that they were not seems to me, but from what I've read, were really the first sort of advanced civilization that they had laws and they had a religion, and they seem to be quite uh, they seem to have a structure. uh, yeah, sorry, they had education system, and they were very well organized, and they had their beliefs as well. Okay, so there were the Sumerians, and they believed in gods, not one god but many gods. And then eventually we end up with the Babylonians, and they had a text, a poem, a dramatic poem called Enuma Elish. Now, I can't say that I'm well qualified to talk about much of this, but I'll just try and give you my take on it. So yeah, in this text, Enuma Elish, every year the holy people of ancient Babylon would recite this poem, and a lot of it is about how the gods um, triumph over chaos to create order. Now, it was one of the motivations of early peoples that they believed that the gods had triumphed over chaos and created order in the world of the gods. In other words, there were two worlds. There was a real world, the world that we live in, the world that's got chaos in it, natural chaos, and man-made chaos as well. Yeah, okay. And then there's the world of the gods, where disorder has been overcome, and everything is in harmony. So there's that world of the gods, and then there's the world of men, where there is chaos. Now, if you can imagine living in, say, ancient Babylon or the Sumerians or whatever, and you had warring tribes coming at you all the time, and there was not the same protection against the elements that we've got now, life could probably be quite hard and chaotic. Yet it could be made tolerable. And it could be made tolerable if you tried to be like those gods, and if you worship those gods and paid homage to them, then you might skew the natural world so that there was less chaos. So the more you pray to the gods and the more you honor the gods who've tamed chaos, the better chance that you will have of surviving in the real world, which is chaotic. But you can skew that chaos, you can reduce it by having a religion. Okay, so yeah, another thing that I found interesting about the belief the beliefs of the Sumerians and the Babylonians about their gods. So not one god, but many gods, okay, with different names, etc., and different characters. They're fighting, they're warring against each other. And what I found interesting is, where did they come from? And as Karen Armstrong, the scholar who wrote this book, points out, that the early peoples never believed that the universe was created out of nothing. This is a new thing for Christians, and it's obviously come from Big Bang cosmology, but there was never a claim, even in the Bible, in the beginning. God doesn't appear God doesn't create the universe out of nothing. There's something there in the first place. And for the Babylonians, their gods emerge from, let's have a look, um, from a primal wasteland, something which has always been there. Yeah. So we've this we've never seen in ancient times people believe, or people didn't believe, that gods emerged out of nothing. They came out of something. It doesn't say how this happened, but they emerged from these waters, or this wasteland, and they became gods, and they gave rise to other gods. So yeah, that was and is interesting, and also that the Jews didn't write down that God created something from nothing. This is a new apologist ploy, that something can't come from nothing. People never believed that. The belief was that there was always something in existence. And I suppose in scientific terms now, we've come to um, speculate that the singularity which expanded was pre-existing, that it always existed, either in one form or another. There was never a time when there was absolutely nothing, and that the universe was created out of absolutely nothing. Yeah, so I'll keep reading this. I don't know if any of you guys have read it, but so far so good. I'm quite. I should have read it years ago, but a lot is making sense, because why do people believe now? What is the big draw on religion? Why would you need religion in a practical sense? Because we live in a world where we don't know a lot. There are a lot of mysteries. We don't know where we came from. We live in a dangerous world where the unpredictable can happen. Natural disasters can happen. You can get ill. You could pick up an illness and die, or become incapacitated, or your loved ones, that could happen to them. You could be in danger from other human beings. There can be wars. We live in a very chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerous world. The same as the Sumerians did, and the same as the ancient Babylonians did. They also lived in a chaotic and dangerous world. And so we can see how in ancient times people appealed to the gods. They created these gods for themselves. They created them and needed them. They needed to appeal to these gods, even if they knew that they created these gods. In some strange way, they needed to appeal to these gods and hope that the gods would repay this homage by making things a little bit less chaotic and allow people to survive the chaos in the real world. And that's why people believe today, because um, I mean, I know a mother who believes, because she doesn't want her she believes that if she believes in God, that it will somehow protect her children from the chaos and danger in the world, and it will protect her as the mother. This is a really strong motivation. So even if people don't believe in life after death, you could still want to follow a religion, hoping that it's going to bring more order and safety out of the sort of random chaos that we see around us. Okay, as for me, um, I also experience this chaos, but and the danger, but I don't appeal to any gods or anything like that. I see it as a waste of time and energy. There's chaos out there, there's danger, there are unpredictable things that could happen. And the best way to guard against those is to be as alert as possible to what's going on around you. The more that you trust a supposed supernatural force, the more time you spend praying to such a supernatural force, uh, the greater the chance that when you need to be alert in that moment, you won't be. So yeah, that's one reason. And of course, well, the main reason is there's no evidence. There's no evidence which has convinced me there is such a thing. So I would just see it futile. And I mean, I'm not like Jordan Peterson that is prepared to entertain, I don't know, some kind of figurehead, some metaphorical figurehead as a basis for everything, as a grounding for everything in existence. To presume that there is such a thing, even though you kind of know that there isn't. I'm not somebody who's prepared to do that. So, consequently, yes, no. I think that the best way forward is to guard against the chaotic and dangerous nature of the world by appealing purely to rational things, appealing to the senses, um, different ways of protecting yourself, getting information, finding out uh, I mean, like we had storms battering the UK. You would get information. You wouldn't pray to your God, and you wouldn't be religious, hoping that somehow you could go out and a tree wouldn't fall on you. So yeah, there's no need. There's no need. At one time, in thousands of years ago, people constructed those gods to protect themselves. We've now got technology, we've now got science, and we can do a much better job of protecting ourselves without appealing to supernatural forces than ever before. Okay, well, that's about it. I've been going on for nearly an hour. I've been talking for nearly an hour, so I think I've covered everything that I want to say. So, yeah, I'll just say good night, and uh, I hope you enjoyed this live stream. And I'll be back again next Monday, and I'll be making some videos in the meantime. Bye for now. Good night.